We have just got a very interesting article when it comes to client performance in New World. We're talking information about DX12, maybe having DLSS, and maybe even at some point ray tracing. Now before I jump in, I just want to give you two little bits of information. I'm not a coder, I'm not a programmer, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to give you my layperson's explanation of what I'm reading. And secondly, this is more the technical side of things. I don't think this necessarily applies to the coding of some of the features, and I'm aware that there were some issues in season 2. There were quite a few bugs, but there were quite a few things that went well, like for example the cross server and stuff. But this is technical, so let's jump in and have a look. So this article today is actually like a mixture of different things, and they call it Happenings from Eternum Summer Medley Fur. And initially it starts talking about the community Q&A, and it shows you the video, and it shows you some of the questions that were asked and answered on Discord. I'm not going to go through these because we pretty much already did that in separate videos. But then there's a very interesting section called New World's Client Performance. We caught up with Mike, I don't know how you say his last name, one of New World's Azoth engine team leads. Now what I find a little bit interesting is that they capitalize the AZ, probably like for Amazon or something, but you know, I just find that interesting. Anyway, and they answer your questions relating to DX12, performance optimization, and DLSS. And the first question is, what are your plans for DX12? When the game came out, you said the game would move to DX12 after a few months. We are missing out on better graphics and potential performance, so states the question. So they say that Rick Lawrence actually confirmed that they were moving to DX12 in 2021, and they are still in active development to do so. Then we basically have some, I'll say either like corporate jargon or technical jargon that I'm not going to try and interpret. So they weigh up the cost of the implementation versus the cost to the game's content creators. The game's content creators in this context is actually, you know, KE, the developers, etc., not me. But they say after all weighing this up, basically, and in consultation with, they say after weighing all of this up, in consultation with the New World leadership, we've taken a longer term approach to supporting new render platform technology. And what they've actually been looking at new tools and technologies that have helped create value immediately for the players and more efficient developer workloads. So what they're basically saying is, we are working on DX12, that is something we're doing, but it's not been one of our priorities. We've actually been prioritizing other systems. And a lot of these updates have actually just been coming as part of the game content updates. And they're actually not called out as standalone engine technologies because they don't actually have much player value. So basically they're not for me and you directly. They're probably helping like Amazon actually create the game and maybe like the back-end technology. And they say in season 2, you may have noticed that more characters on screen simulate the cloth apparel from further away. Now I've got to admit, did not notice that. I wasn't looking, not really noticed it. What I have noticed is my CPU is absolutely just always on all the time, complete massive bottleneck, but we'll come to that in a minute. These are just a few examples we made strategic investment choices to support specific game content rather than rush out support for the new renderer, i.e. DirectX 12. And then they go on to say that DX12 alone wouldn't be some kind of magic bullet. It wouldn't basically mean that the question that says we're missing out on performance and graphics and all this kind of stuff, it's actually saying that that's not quite true. I read this bit. Basically, DirectX 12 seems to give you more direct access to the core of the computer, and that means you would then have to do more of the work yourself, whereas DirectX 11 sort of does some of that for you. And I think here they sort of say it's a little bit like driving an automatic. DirectX 11 is automatic. It works, you know, most of the time it's completely fine. But a manual, you know, if you don't know how to drive a manual, you're not going to be any better than the automatic, but a manual gives you that sort of like more control. However, there's more work to do. Unfortunately, it sort of reads like, we can't do this quickly. We have to do more work ourselves if we do DirectX 12. But, you know, at least they're working towards it, but they're sort of explaining why it's not something they can just switch on. Then the next question is basically, what are you doing concerning performance optimizations? I'm presuming they mean like right now. And then basically they sort of say, well, they don't really answer this question directly, but they say we're working with all the other teams trying to help them improve their performance. You know, it's a shared system, so if one team is doing something, they alone could basically be causing some issues, and we don't want that to happen, so we work with them to make sure that they're happy, rather than making whole changes to the whole engine. Because degraded or improved performance in any one part can have a cascading effect to all of the parts of the game. While the Azoth engine team can and does deliver incremental changes to our engine tech on behalf of New World, one of our primary jobs is helping other contributing teams identify and measure the performance impact of their changes. So what I just said, basically, they're helping other teams. Then they basically reiterate that DX12 alone wouldn't offer like one feature that would improve performance. And then they say something which I think we've all long believed, at least I have, because it sounds like an absolutely nuclear thermic reactor going off in my room when I start this game half the time. What we can say about our game clients is that when the performance is reaching its limit, the game is often CPU bound. People have been saying that for ages, but you know, it's nice to actually see it written down. And what they've been saying is that, well, we've been trying to make improvements here, either using multiple CPU cores or actually moving some of it to the GPU. And then this gives me some huge copium, to be sure. We plan to release some significant changes to the game's client streaming technology to go along with the upcoming content releases. Now, I take that to mean the expansion. They also say following the Season 2 release, our 2.0.2 update will address hitched frames. This goes along with a Discord post that was made today, which they said they're going to improve the client performance in the next bug fix. However, they say while it won't likely address all the sources of the problems, this change should improve everyone's experience regardless. However, the scale of improvement drastically depends on the local hardware setup. More details to be included in the patch notes. I'm guessing this is addressing the hitched frames that are in this Q&A. And when they say depend on the local hardware setup, I'm guessing the better your computer, the better you'll have and a better time you'll have. But interesting nonetheless. If I'm honest, I would expect that patch early next week. And then the next question is, how difficult would it be to add DLSS? Do you have any plans to do so? So they say DLSS is dependent on implementing DirectX 12. So they say they will investigate it in greater depth once they actually have DX12. Now, personally, just to say, I'm not actually expecting DX12 with the expansion. I sort of feel like they did some changes this time around, but maybe they are actually going to drop it with the expansion. I sort of feel like that's something you might want to do at a quiet moment, but you know, who knows. But they'll look at it basically once they have DX12 to a beta ready state for players. So it's very possible that you'll actually be able to pick which version you want to run when it actually gets launched, and there'll be like a beta, or you can go in DX11. Alright, that sounds like a cool thing. And they say that not only does it offer DLSS, it might also offer ray tracing support. Then they say etc, and the smart people out there might be like, they mean this, this and this. I have no idea what they mean. Now the next bit is sort of interesting. They say we basically want to like give you one more thought, and they want to say that so much can and is still possible in terms of performance optimization and improved visualization, regardless of whether New World is running DX12 or DX11. And it's not as simple as saying that DX12 will basically be the thing that is defining good or bad performance or good or bad visuals. This is a funny statement. Both great games and poor games have been delivered with either method. Hey, they're not wrong there. Our hope is that you can feel the love and effort we put into New World's engine. I mean, the problem with this is they're saying this statement after a lot of people are being like, hey, you've actually caused many more issues than you've solved. So this is just like a weird thing. And they say season over season, so they are planning stuff on a regular basis. And they basically say, in the meantime, if you are experiencing issues, make sure you report it because it actually helps. So there's a couple of interesting things that they're actually saying in this whole sort of question and answer setting. Number one, we are working on DX12, but it's more time consuming and not as easy as you might think. It's not a magic bullet, but we're still working on it. It's just going to require sort of more manual intervention rather than this automated intervention. Number two, when we get DirectX 12, you might also actually see DLSS, which by the way, I didn't actually explain what DLSS is. If you don't know, it's basically some scaling technology that Nvidia has. AMD has their own make of it, which I can't remember off the top of my head, but it changes your resolution to keep your frame rate, basically. And they say ray tracing as well. And the third point I would say is they're saying we can still make changes while the game is live. We're not sort of like limited right now. And that gets me thinking why they would say this now. I think they're saying it now because there have been some performance issues. I still maintain that I think they've made some tweaks now for the future, and that sort of backs it up. I don't really know why the cloth thing would be that relevant, but maybe there's some internals underneath the hood, if you will. But they've made some changes. It's maybe not quite worked out this time, and they want to tell us why, and they're going to try and address some of them. I also think that this might be good news for the game going forward, that they're like, hey, we are going to be updating this engine. They didn't mention Lord of the Rings because that would be absolutely chaotic, but you've got to assume that they're going to improve New World, and then Lord of the Rings is going to use the same engine. We know it's using the Azoth engine. I think it would be crazy if they start trying to diverge those game engines. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. As they say, DX12 isn't necessarily a magic bullet, but if they can get the sort of like lower level detail, the performance could happen if they work hard to get there. It feels like being able to connect to the CPU more directly is probably better than not doing, but it's probably harder work to do that, and that's what they're talking about. And then if beyond that we get that DLSS, which is very difficult for me to say by the way, and we get stuff like ray tracing, yeah, like I think things will start looking up for New World. So there's big possibility there. There's not much actual sort of like tangible changes right now, but that's because we're talking about an engine rather than anything else. We're not even talking about like content here. We're not talking about arenas or anything like that. We're talking about the core engine. And not being like a programmer or coder myself, I don't really know how much of an impact that has. I think this is different, by the way, from the myriad of bugs that New World has had over the time. I think that's probably just like spaghetti coding it going from a survival game to an MMO. I don't think that's necessarily the engine, but maybe some of it is. I just do not know. Either way, I think it's pretty fascinating. It's good news to think that we might get more improvements in the future, and they specifically said season on season, and I think the expansion is going to bring something as well, even though I doubt that it's actually going to be DX12 itself. A weirdly complicated video because I don't really fully understand the subject, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to support me here on YouTube, you can do so by becoming a member, or a very easy way to support me is to come and follow me over on Twitch. I'm streaming pretty regularly these times in the UK daytimes, and we've made a company on Barry that is purple. Everybody is welcome. Join the Discord. I'll get you in the company. Have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.